Really interesting discussion here, looking about innovation, PropTech, data. There's obviously been a great deal of focus on that in the market, especially because of the health crisis and those kinds of things. And we're just going to look at some of the impacts, both of the crisis on that, but also how data, innovation, and PropTech and FinTech are both influencing the market at the moment. Super panel here. So I'm just going to introduce them to you. So let's start. First of all, we've got Menno Lammers. Menno, just take a quick kind of minute just to introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me here. Looking forward to have the dialogue about innovation, data, and PropTech, of course. I'm the quartermaster of PropTech for Good. PropTech for Good is an alliance which propels real estate and technology forward to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And besides that, I'm also the founder of PropTech NL and also one of the founding board members of the PropTech House, the European network.
Great, thanks. Oh, sorry, did I cut you off there?
No. Thank you, that's me.
In full flow, Menno. Great, Nikki.
Great. Yes, thank you very much for having me here today virtually. It's a shame that we can't do these things in person at the moment. But the one thing that is advantageous is that I'm able to stream into you guys to be involved today because I'm based in New York, despite my my accent, which would suggest otherwise. So for me, I'm a futurist. I look at the trends in the real estate industry, and especially now with the huge disruption, I have a lot of my clients coming to me going, what's next? What should we be thinking about? So I do a lot of consulting work. I've been called on to speak to different boards about the trends that are coming. And really what I do is, through my consultancy, Real Estate of the Future, is try to, predict what might be coming next. In addition to that, I started and founded the international networking group Women in PropTech. And my latest initiative is running a series of masterclasses through the American PropTech Academy. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. Anthony.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon or good morning to everybody, as the case may be. So my name is Anthony Shayle. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Relendex Limited. We're a peer-to-peer platform where we rely very substantially on the use of PropTech and FinTech to run our business. And we see that as being an increasingly important aspect of what we do to drive down our cost base and to increase the efficiency of service, both to our investors and our clients.
Great, thanks very much. Clemens.
Yeah, also from my side, great to be here. I'm really looking forward to the conversations. A couple of words about me. I'm CEO of EverEstate. EverEstate is the digital broker of the Sieger Group. The Sieger Group is a Berlin-based real estate group, owner-led, and I think very German-focused and German-based, and started a couple of years ago to see the great potential in PropTech and heavily investing into own PropTech ventures. I've joined only recently at the beginning of the year. Before I was running actually or founding a fintech called Relendex, which we sold a couple of years ago. So actually bringing together like the fintech world and the PropTech world now, very, very exciting. And a lot of experiences and learnings that we had in the fintech world, which we currently apply also in the PropTech world.
Great, thanks very much, Clemens. Neal.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neal Gemassmer. I manage Yardi's international operations. Yardi Systems is one of the largest global PropTech companies. We've been innovating around real estate for the last 40 years and looking forward to today's conversation.
Great, thanks, Neal. Just in terms of I mentioned there in the introduction the health crisis, of course, which is uppermost in everybody's mind and appears in a lot of the discussions, particularly that we've had over the past 2 days here. And there's been a lot of discussion about it acting as an accelerator on a variety of trends. Do you see that that's also true of PropTech and FinTech more generally, Neal?
I think one of the things that COVID's done and the impact that it's had in 2020 is that it's accelerated the overall investment in technology and the transformation that real estate has to go to, based on the awareness that as the world went to a work from home strategy about 6-7 months ago, is that business rules and business processes were largely inadequate to be able to manage operations moving forward in many ways. So not in all ways, but it certainly pointed out that many organizations were undercapitalized in terms of the investment. And I think that one of the things that it also showed is that certain asset classes are at greater risk of needing to transform faster than others. And so an example of that would be the traditional office space, where if we look at capital cities or any major market right now, the majority of employees of corporate occupiers are still working from home. And increasingly, that work from home capacity is going to carry out into 2021. And so we see the asset and the technology that you'll need to be able to use to manage these assets effectively will change as more flexible space needs to be added into how buildings and properties are managed. And this will affect all of us. But I think this innovation will also help provide additional differentiation with how assets are managed.
Great, thanks. Just coming to you, Nikki. I mean, you mentioned that you're spending a lot of time, obviously looking at the future and advising on that. I suppose, what do you see as the latest trends in the PropTech, FinTech world, and how do you see them influencing the real estate sector?
No, absolutely. And I'll just echo everything that Neal said, that the pandemic really has been a catalyst for change. And I'm very much an optimist. And I just like to remind people that really what we need to be doing is that when we're thinking and we're implementing new technologies or new processes or new ways of working with our spaces, that we really want to be projecting well into the future. We actually want to be projecting towards, say, 2030 and rethinking the way that we do things. So, talking about having, a hybrid in-person and, external, work from home or work remote strategy is something that definitely fits into, into part of that and is part of the conversation. Now, the one thing that, and why I refer to 2030 in particular is if we're talking about commercial real estate, you want to remember that our population is changing, the demographics are changing, and the workplace makeup is changing. So what we're going to see by 2030 is that 75% of the workforce is going to consist of millennials and Gen Z. So the expectation there is that you are going to be able to engage with technology. You want to be able to work remote. You want to be able to have more lifestyle choices. So actually the changes that we're bringing in today is going to benefit us in the long term. So, the hot topics at the moment are really, in the commercial aspect, thinking about two things. Firstly, how can we bring people back to the office in a way that's safe? And a lot of people, owners and, property managers have nailed it really by, bringing in different solutions such as temperature checks, robots, and different systems, using AI to sort out which teams are coming through. And there's very sophisticated technologies to be able to do this. But then the next step really becomes, and what I describe as, essentially the other enemy that is preventing people from returning to the office. We've gotten over the safety issue, which we've solved through technology and other aspects. But then it becomes that there's actually a valid alternative, which is working remote. And that's the thing, that's the hard nut to crack, which is why we do need to be rethinking the way that that we occupy spaces. How do you make it preferable? How do you make it more productive? How do you actually encourage people to come back? Because if we don't do that in, the most vulnerable asset class being commercial space at the moment, there's going to be a big problem. So big problem at the moment, but that means huge opportunity. So I encourage everyone to be thinking well into the future about, where the opportunities lie and not just, what is 2021 going to look like?
No, that's interesting. Thanks. I just want to pick up maybe with you, Anthony, just in terms of PropTech, FinTech, I guess, how does that, just explain a little bit more about particularly your business, how that works and I suppose how that, what sort of solution that's creating?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because essentially we stand in the center between investors who provide us with funding and the borrowers. But the part that links the two together, the borrowers are selling their developed residential product onto end users. The integration of fintech into this process is crucially important because we have a strategic partner called Your Keys that provides a documentation and conveyancing system that allows the mortgages, residential mortgages, to track the process of their mortgage being drawn with the purchasers of the borrower's properties and us, who are able to see how far each transaction is moving. That is crucially important to the ecosystem of where we sit, because that enables not only for everybody who's involved in that process of sale of property to track it, but it actually speeds it up as well. So typically here in the UK, a residential transaction takes between 6 and 12 weeks to be completed. This system, through Your Keys, allows it to take place in approximately 4 or 5 weeks. That is vitally important to the borrowers. It's obviously important to the end purchasers, and of course to our investors who want to know on a granular basis where each loan is and how those underlying properties are being transacted. So fintech is vitally important to everything we do. And the more we can integrate the systems together, the faster that process goes and the more efficient it becomes.
And that's interesting because there's a lot of elements there of challenges that are being met by solutions created by technology. I mean, Clemens, I wanted to pick up with you. How long has this been running? And obviously, this is presumably for the residential side. What does the solution involve? And do you think that there's a more general kind of view to creating efficiencies within that residential side? We've seen here that there's a lot more reliance on things like 360 video and those kinds of things. I mean, what's your sense of the role that technology is playing there, particularly looking at your platform?
Good question. So maybe I think you touched already on a couple of points. Of course, the entire topic around digital sales is probably one of the most important topics currently in the residential area. I think here in Germany we were quite lucky in terms of the crisis, because the Corona crisis, especially on the residential real estate, didn't hit us so hard. What we did see is actually that. In the peak of the crisis, actually, financing got a little bit more difficult for the people who wanted to actually purchase a property. So the linkage between the real estate agents and financing solutions and the banks got especially crucial. And there are fintech opportunities that are already in the market, but are also like advanced and continuously advanced over time, have played a crucial role actually to keep the market open and to actually make transactions happy, especially as they were actually also offered remote. If you now look on the real estate market, on the PropTech market, especially during the lockdown phase, 360 degrees visiting and all that stuff became like super crucial. Not that people didn't work on it a long time before, but I think that was really the moment of time where everybody understood that we need to change the way of how we think, how we sell apartments and residential real estate. But I think for me, if we now really look into the future, and I think this, what Nikki said, we don't have to think like for next month or next year, but we actually have to take a 2030 view. Is the real interesting piece, and the question is where will it go? And I think what we see and what we also in our company at EverEstate see, yes, we are following the idea of really fully digitalizing the sales process, and we already have like quite good successes there. That we have a complete remote digital sales, but what we stronger believe in that the technology and the data that we're currently able to collect and that we currently are developing, that it really helps to change the entire ecosystem and how buyers, property developers and brokers work together. And so far it was a relatively closed shop and transparent, and with all the data and technology we are able to create way more transparency, which all participants actually will benefit from. So we will be able to provide to the end customer a way better suiting solution, so way better suiting property for his particular needs. But we will also help the property developer to way better understand what the customer currently and also in the future needs and wants. And especially if we touch on topics like Generation Y and etc., we gain more and more insights and data, what is actually the points that these customers really need. And I think, again, for the brokers, with really creating an ecosystem between the end user, the financing providers, the property developers, and at the end also the brokers, we gain more and more efficiency also for the brokers, and at the end a better service for the customers. So I think really it's more about connecting all the different elements and losing ourselves a little bit from, I think, what maybe in the past was a thinking of, if I win, you lose, more into a more cooperative view, and that that's actually, we can increase the cake and everybody benefits if we cooperate closer and also help each other to understand the business further. And I think that is the direction that we are going. So yeah, digitalize the brokerage, phase one, but phase two is really to connect technology-wise the different partners that are there in the real estate industry to really gain way larger benefits and insights.
Okay, good. Menno, I just want to pick up with you. I mean, you know, we've had some sessions already on impact investment and various other things. PropTech for good. You know, I mean, that's picking up there. There's obviously efficiencies, there's different things like that, but we've also got a whole story around wellness, those kinds of things that have, and also well-being in terms of the greater focus, because people are being at home. You know, they're not necessarily going into the office, or at least they're rethinking some of those things. I mean, as an example, you know, I would have been on a plane 3 times a week at least for the majority of the year, and I haven't done that, and I don't regret not doing it at the moment. I miss it a little, but not as much. What's your sense of some of these, some of the, I guess, the longer lasting trends that we might see from this, and how, you know, innovation tech plays into that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because for me it feels like everything is the future of work, living, retail, logistics. It looks like everything will be reinventing, or we are rethinking things in general. That's one. 2 days ago there was the State of the Union by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. She talked about green and digital, so really the transformation. So there's a lot of things going on, and of course it's already said, health and safety is I think topic number one. But also back to nature. There's also some sort of safe back to nature, back to the roots. Your feeling, and we all know that being in nature is also good for your health, good for your brain. So that's not technology, but it's something which is going on. Also, you see more. I always say Bosco Verticale, because that's the building I recognize in that way on the more green buildings in that way, because they put a whole wood on that building. So I think we are rethinking health, and of course solutions can help us with that. Also, something is not digital, but it's also something which is popping up more and more, is paint, a powder, which is good for nature in that way, not made by chemicals. So that kind of things, just to give other examples than only the digital one. Of course, we're talking about innovation, data, but that's also innovation. And it's also something, what is going on. And I expect that the Sustainable Development Goal 3, of course, health and well-being will be one which is not gone for the next months. It will take more time. Sustainable cities and communities, the SDG 11. We will have other discussions. You see that some parts of the city are changing because there were roads and now there is a park. So also that kind of things is really interesting. What's happening, and of course, really looking forward if we're going to make connections like, for example, I have problems with breathing. My watch knows that when I walk into an area where the quality of air will be bad, will it make a connection? I don't know if it's already there, but I can imagine that the health and well-being in cities, because cities bring us a lot about growth, innovation, but when things go bad, for a virus, for example, then also it speeds up more and more. We see that in the Netherlands. Tonight there will be a press conference by the minister. And so probably he's going to lock down specific areas in Amsterdam or in Utrecht or in The Hague. So I think that those things are changing, and we get another feeling about health instead of I go to the doctor and get my medicine. So that will change.
Okay, good. Neal, I wanted to pick up with you. I mean, some of these changes may be long lasting. Some of them might be short term, but for sure, rather like technology in essence revolutionized the retail experience when Amazon came on and started delivering things and gave you a shop that was on your computer. You no longer needed a large print kind of guide to it. Do you see a route back in a way? Do you think that people will go straight back to the office, or do you think we're with this and that's because technology enables it, and therefore there's going to be far more focus on, for all the sectors, using technology in a more productive way, in a sense?
I think one thing to remember is that there's always been innovation in real estate and innovation in technology, but the circumstances that we find ourselves in right now, there's acceleration of the use of technology, and that's been through different kind of foundations, whether it's cloud-based systems and online payment systems and other things that facilitate transactions to the same degree that a paperless process in other industries, and let's look at hotel bookings or travel, facilitates things that we can do in real estate more effectively. And whether that's on the buy and the sell side or on the rental side and on the asset management side. An example would be in residential, and this idea that increasingly technology allows you to identify a area that you want to live in, identify a building, a property, a unit that you'd like to live in, view the space online, and then do an application online, do a background screening check online, is make a payment online, sign a contract online, receive a digital key, and move in without ever having to necessarily talk to someone or do something in paper. And I think that's an example of how technology has enabled this more frictionless process, and it benefits many people. I think what COVID has further done is not created anything new per se, but it will accelerate investments and changes in how people work. And one example would be is that co-working has always been around or has been around for a long time. In the UK, as an example, is really one of the largest markets for traditional business centers. And then co-working, and then this little company called WeWork came around, which really kind of accelerated the entire idea of co-working and flex in many different models. But that trend has already started. And so I think one of the big observations that we would have is that traditional long-term corporate occupier leases and the amount of space that they have will decrease both in duration as well as in terms of space. but they won't reduce the number of people, but they'll change the options that people have or their employees have in terms of where and how frequently they need to work out of a physical space. And that might be that they still go back to that main corporate campus, but rather than a fixed desk, they have more flexible space, whether it's provided by the building owner, by the corporate occupier, or by a third-party service provider. And I think we'll also see more hub and spoke. So the idea that you have these mammoth centralized type of campuses, you'll have greater flexibility for employees to work closer to home and or even also from home. And so I think that is all happening, and COVID's helped accelerate that. I don't see a return to, let's say if we were here 12 months ago, which we would not have anticipated COVID, I don't think it will resume to 2019 type of strategies. I think that ship has sailed.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. We've got a question in from Fernando Martin. Thank you, Fernando, for that. And just a reminder that if you're watching the session in the auditorium, if you open the web app or the mobile app, then you can ask questions, and I'll try to pick those up and make sure that we answer those questions for you. But Fernando mentioned, when are we going to see PropTech for poor regions? Not all real estate assets are in downtown New York City, for example. So I think that's quite an interesting question. Nikki, is that for you?
Yeah, I'll take it since we have New York mentioned, and 100%. And we talk about the democratization of technology and accessibility, and this is the thing. I'm working. If you were trying to pick my accent, I'm originally from South Africa, so equality and equity, is something that's very important to me. And the beautiful thing and the elegant thing about PropTech and technology is that it's meant to actually make a more even playing field, because, in Africa, what you have is leapfrog technology. So, a developed market and a robust market such as, the US or London or whatever it might be, they'll invest in creating something and testing it out and refining it. And then, another community can come in and go, okay, we'll take the best of that and use it for ourselves. So, to run an app isn't expensive. A lot of the apps that we have on our phones are free, because once you have the development costs, the costs are pretty much out. There's other revenue models, such as a revenue share model, that can, also help to support the cost. So it's available. And the idea is that, once you put everything on an app, it's meant to reduce the costs of running. It's meant to make things more efficient. It's meant to make the operating costs of buildings more efficient as well, because using the data, you can start to monitor, okay, when should we be adjusting the heat loads? When should we be, looking at our, peak energy demands? So this stuff is designed for everyone. We are, there tends to be a focus on, as you're saying, like Midtown Manhattan. I've been on a few calls recently. I co-chair the Urban Land Institute's Real Estate Technology Council alongside Joel Pollack, the author of Rethinking Real Estate, who, a few of you know. And one of the big discussions at the ULI is about, okay, well, how do we actually have more discussions around different communities such as Harlem, Brooklyn, Queens, etc. So the conversations are happening. The technology is for everyone. But, let the guys that have the budget to be the first movers, let them spend it developing this stuff, and then it becomes available for everyone.
And Anthony, you've been in the market for a long time, more recently with an innovation hat on, just as, before I had no innovation at all. And then suddenly we're running a virtual conference and an exhibition. Just, I suppose, putting that into context, do you see part of this digitalization democratizing in some ways this part of the industry? Because previously the property industry was not known for being the most innovative necessarily. What's your sense of that?
I think the big changes that we're seeing now are the result of a number of factors coming together. And to just draw a parallel, which may sound completely off the wall as I speak it, but think about it for a second. Uber. So we may love it or hate it, but Uber could not have existed without the combination of technologies, which is global positioning systems by satellite, mobile phone, the ability to have mobile phones connect to the internet, and for a great extent, hybrid cars, because they're far more efficient in terms of their fuel usage. So Without that combination of technologies, the Uber concept probably would not have been born. So if you think about it where we are now in the real estate world, we have a confluence of factors, one of which is the terrible story about the coronavirus and all that's happened over the last 6-9 months. Where will that take us in terms of having to remote work? We have the increasing rate of digitization. All of this brings a number of threats and a number of opportunities. And I think the word democratization is absolutely correct, because where you bring a number of different factors together, inevitably you bring a wider spread access into an industry or a sector. So we have, through the PropTech world and through the peer-to-peer world, been able to give access to investors from a wide range of backgrounds. So it's everything from institutional right the way through to high net worth. I don't mean people with several £1 million to invest. I'm talking about people with much more modest means are capable of entering into an environment that allows them to have access to investments that would not otherwise have been presented to them. And I think that democratization of investment medium is really important. It must have, as Richard, you'll always know, I've always said, peer-to-peer needed regulation. It's now got regulation, and I think that's really important. But I think within a regulated environment, democratization is appropriate and necessary, and we are seeing it. It's coming through the investment world into real estate.
And that's interesting. I just want to pick that up with you, Neal, in a way. What do you think which sectors do you think are most likely to, I suppose, to a certain degree, benefit from some of the changes that we're seeing? Because I mean, there's an interesting point, around, if we're going to have some form of economic crisis, then, a lot of companies are going to be focused on budget. They're going to be focused on things that create efficiencies for them. So I guess, how are you seeing that in terms of the future? I guess there's those companies that are going to invest with these innovations that come forward, but there's also going to be a lot, particularly looking at the asset management side, who are going to be focused on budget and making savings.
Yeah, I think certainly one thing that will continue to happen is that certain parts of the industry are disrupted, and you'll see losses in terms of consolidation and or fees in jeopardy. And an example would be your traditional high street agent market in the UK and in other parts of the world, where there's been so much disruption there that the number of fee managers or agencies are shrinking because, again, they can't provide the value that an online platform can provide. And that would be one example. I think the entire area of asset management, though, in terms of needing to leverage off of technology to be able to make better buy-sell decisions, make better decisions in terms of the tenant mixture that one has. And one of the big things that we see with capital flows right now is that capital is flowing across regions. So no longer is a fund manager just investing in, let's say, in the UK, Core Plus office, but they're just spreading that investment around multiple different regions and multiple different asset classes as well. And so the need and requirement to have better data is super important, and technology enables that. I think one of the predictions would be is that if people aren't investing in technology today at an aggressive rate, then they won't be as effective as other individuals and other companies moving forward. They won't be able to service their customers, whether it's someone who wants to buy a property or sell a property or manage a property. And I think that will continue to disrupt the market. I think there will be lots of benefits for the customer, though, and the customer then being defined as either the investor or a tenant and the resident.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And Nikki, coming to you, I mean, how do you see? I mean, we've talked a little bit about the future for that. How do you see the demand drivers for space at the moment? I mean, certainly if we're looking here in the UK, Anthony, I know, is in his office in Farringdon, but actually the number of people back at work at the moment is not huge in terms of offices. what's the position there in New York, and I guess what are you seeing in terms of the demand drivers going forward for space? Is that space likely to change in terms of the requirement of people going forward?
Yeah, and look, this is a hot topic at the moment, and unfortunately, because New York was so terribly affected, being, the epicenter of the pandemic very early on, the city really has been devastated. And I'll just throw out a few numbers. I'm going to be, I don't want to depress anyone. I will get back to the positive stuff, but what we're seeing at the moment is that when the pandemic started, 40% of more of the wealthy neighborhoods just emptied out. We have with commercial space, CBRE puts it at 8%. The transportation puts it at 15% occupancy. We have the highest vacancy rate for residential properties in Manhattan at the moment. And we're just seeing the closure of more and more stores, dining, etc. The schools aren't back. There was a delay of 2 weeks. That's now been extended to 3 weeks where the kids aren't back at school, at public school. So we're right in the midst of a, bleep, and it's dire. So what's happening is that everyone's just really had to rethink everything, and of course on top of that the hotels are closed, and we know that the situation is going to continue for quite a while, and that there's going to be ongoing ramifications because of this disruption. So what we are seeing is that there is more talk about, well, what do we use spaces for? We have a high vacancy rate. And this is why I say we actually do need to rethink everything, because the way that we were working, the way that, the models that we had before, they're not appropriate to this current climate or for, the 2030 situation. So I'm, my background's, I'm an architect by trade. And that's my training and working in mixed use master plans. And my belief is really what you're looking at is a high tech, low tech, and no tech solution. What we need to do is actually look at where the vacancies are. We need to apply very simple economics, supply and demand. We have a lot of supply. What sectors are having demand? What sectors need space? Because we have a lot of vacant space at the moment. And really what it comes down to is two things. Number one, flexibility. We need to have the option to have the change of use for underutilized assets, that you can have residential, for example, for the homeless population in commercial. I'm not saying that's the right solution, or childcare facilities in a commercial building or whatever it might be. We need to be able to do that. And we also need to understand that there's different types of business models available. Dark kitchens, dark stores, these are things that are becoming increasingly spoken about at the moment, where it's delivery only, that people aren't going into spaces, in person to dine, but they're getting things delivered. We know that, logistics is the highest performing asset class, and it was in the Manhattan market or the New York's, the tri-state market even before the pandemic hit, which is a homage to the prevalence and the increasing popularity of e-commerce. So there are opportunities out there, but we just need to be a little bit realistic about, what is working, what's not working. We need to look at the trends and understand a lot of these trends are here to stay, and that the old way of doing things isn't working. So rethink, and be playful. That's what I say.
Can I just ask Nikki a question on that? So Nikki, one of the biggest challenges, of course, is how quickly government moves, or I should say how slowly sometimes government moves. And, we've seen it in different parts over a period of time, but what do you see, I guess the U.S. government, or specifically your part of the woods in Manhattan, trying to do to change some of these zoning restrictions, which is really what it comes down to?
Yeah, 100%. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm not going to give a date, but we're having one of the masterclasses that I'm running in a couple of weeks. We're having Rachel Loeb, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the NYC EDC, because I'm asking that exact question. What is the city of New York, for example, doing to allow for additional flexibility? So it's a zoning question. They've been able to do, small little moves, such as now, if you come into New York, we're doing all alfresco dining. And in my neighborhood of the West Village, it is absolutely wonderful because everybody's outside. It has this, this real European feel. they've allowed restaurants to serve alcohol and do it as a takeaway, which is something that didn't happen before. So there's these little measures that are coming in bit by bit. But I think we do need to see a bigger consideration, because, things are fundamentally different, and we do need to have these measures to keep business alive. And very, 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 very importantly, we haven't spoken that much about retail, but to keep the ground floor plane and the street active and vibrant and safe and wonderful, because that's what's going to keep our downtown areas, a place that people want to come back to. If we're coming back to the downtown and it's all homeless people and trash and construction, which is what New York is at the moment, and this is why, this is what a big problem is for us. If we're not invigorating the ground floor and the street life and the city life, then, that's going to be a problem. So they're doing things in bits and bits. And look, New York's super innovative, like you and I and everyone here knows that. And I'm actually excited to see, what else comes out of this, which is completely out of the box.
Yeah, Amsterdam's certainly done a fairly good job, as an example, which is where I'm based, where they've allowed restaurants, as an example, to take over parking spaces on the streets for a while, so that one is that as people were allowed to go back to restaurants, that they would have more outdoor seating. And I think that was a really quick move by the local government here, which tends to act also very favorably to reacting to different stress factors.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely idea. And I know in Berlin, which I thought was quite cute, there were actually people were projecting movies onto blank walls, so that people would have a reason to come outside and, activate the space. So, as architects, city planners, we've been thinking about, public places for a long time. So again, same as with the technology, a lot of smart people have been working on this for a while. There's solutions that have already been designed previously. It's about allowing for them to be implemented and investing in it for the betterment of our cities.
Now, we've only got about 5 minutes left. This has zoomed past, and there's been a lot of interesting things there about innovation, I think. Just a couple of quick ones. Clemens, just in terms of, you mentioned there the digitization of the residential sales process. Do you think that can also happen with, do you think the next logical step for that is that will also begin to happen for the commercial world?
Yes, definitely. I think at the end, you start with a slightly easier product in terms of what you can digitalize, and I think that's always what happens. But of course, you will definitely also see digitalization in the commercial space, and maybe it's even more easier than in the residential area, because I think the factors that people look for are way more straightforward, and I think a residential purchase or private purchase is also a very emotional thing. And I think on the commercial side, it is a little bit more rational. So in that sense, commercial side is actually more with data and with transparency. It's even easier to digitalize.
Okay, good. We've got about 2.5 minutes left, so that gives us 30 seconds each, just to give a kind of quick view on what do we think the main trends will be in terms of innovation, technology, PropTech, FinTech, whichever you want to choose. Which will be the biggest trend over the next, let's say, 12 months? Who should we start with? Let's start with you, Menno. 30 seconds. You've already used up one.
The biggest trend, of course, will be health and well-being. It will continue, but digital and green, I already said that, will be in the Netherlands, but also in Europe will get a big push. So that will be one to look forward to.
Okay, everything related around health and well-being. Great. Anthony?
I think the key area that's going to grow over the next 12 months is going to be a need for increased connectivity. That's bandwidth, security, stability, speed. The more we work from home, the more we'll need that. I think the one area that nobody has really latched onto yet is the importance of remote security working, and that will be very important, because we constantly rely upon domestic broadband, working from home, that needs to be upgraded. That's something for the next 12 months for sure.
Okay, super. Clemens.
I would say integration in the value chain, connecting the parties closer together, and with that, creating better data and clearer insights of the different needs of the customer groups. I think that will accelerate dramatically.
Okay, great. Neal.
Two things. One would be is contact tracing and how to manage space within a existing office space so that people can get back to work. The second thing will be is this trend towards greater flexibility, and that lease structures, space structures will require greater flexibility. And then just for fun, I'll add on to one of the biggest changes will continue to be to take friction out of a process, which will lead to greater investments in technology.
Great. And last but very much not least, Nikki.
I mean, you saved the best for last. Let's be honest over here. Yeah, look, I'll echo a lot of what's been said. I think that point about friction is very important, and it's something that Clemens has, been mentioning, and I'll absolutely second that. I think a lot of companies have now gotten on the data train and starting to use IoT and monitoring in their workspaces. They're starting to experiment with PropTech and realize, hold on a sec, there's a lot of benefit. So I kind of call it, we've already have the Zoom boom today. As we've started to embrace some of these technologies, we're going to see the next iteration of going, all right, I'm hooked. This is good. What else can we do? And let's actually start making it not just part of our budgets as a cost center, but actually part of our budgets as something that is going to bring a lot of revenue in. So I think we're going to see, the next phase.
Great. That's interesting. And from our side, this was a kind of innovation investment that started back in, I think, May, June time, that we built over the summer. And definitely that's an area that we're going to be investing more in terms of the idea of a kind of permanent exhibition that connects people and also builds a community, I think, which picks up some of the points that we've had there. Thanks very much for joining us and sharing your insights.